In this board, we'll be talking about a very important topic called anal cushions. Let's talk about that first. Anal cushions and sphincters, anal sphincters. Okay, it's better to talk about the sphincters first so that we can understand the cushions better. So, let me tell you something, that this is rectum, and this is anal canal, and above here is rectum. Okay, now the rectum has inner circular smooth muscle cell layer, right? Inner circular smooth muscle cell layer. This layer, this inner circular layer, becomes continuous with the anal canal, and it thickens at the anal canal to form the internal anal sphincter. So what is internal anal sphincter? It's smooth muscle, right, derived from the descending or the continuation of the inner circular coat of rectum, muscle coat of rectum. And there's also outer circular longitudinal coat. I'm going to give it different color. Now this coat keeps descending, and it also continues into the anal canal, but I will tell you what happens later. Now let's focus our attention on the external sphincter system of the anal canal. This is the anus, anal opening. So the external sphincter system is skeletal muscle, voluntary, right, supplied by branches from the pudendal nerve, somatic nerve, and it's composed, it acts as one unit, but actually it's composed of three subunits. There is one which is just under the skin. There's a portion which is immediately under the skin, and there's a portion just above that. There's a portion which is just above that, and there's a portion which is very deep, embedded deeply inside. Okay? All of that is called external anal sphincter complex. This part, which is just under the skin, we call this part as, because it's under the skin, the subcutaneous part. We call it subcutaneous part because it's just under the skin. The part which is deep, right, we call it deep part. No fun in that. We call it deep part. And the part in between, unfortunately, they did not name it intermediate part. They just call it the superficial part. Superficial part. Okay. Now many people think that the external anal sphincter is circular, but in fact it's not. It's somewhat oval. I'll show you later in another diagram. But what I want you to know is that when we focus here, this area is the intersphincteric plane that I told you about, which contains the glands. Now, and remember something else, that here is the levator ani muscle. Right? Levator ani muscle is over here. Now, earlier I told you that rectum has inner circular muscle coat and outer longitudinal muscle coat. Now the outer longitudinal muscle coat, when it descends down, it enters the intersphincteric plane, and with it, it takes some fibers from the levator ani, and it forms a conjoint structure called conjoint longitudinal muscle. The structure is called conjoint longitudinal muscle. What is conjoint longitudinal muscle? It's partly the descending outer longitudinal smooth muscles of the rectum, and partly muscle fibers derived from the levator ani, from the pelvic floor. Together, they descend in the intersphincteric plane. Together, they descend in the intersphincteric plane, and they fill the intersphincteric plane. So in order, from the mucosa side, moving deep, we have mucosa, and then submucosa, and then internal sphincter, and then the intersphincteric plane containing the conjoint longitudinal muscle, and then the external sphincter complex. Outside that is called ischioanal fossa. We'll talk about it later. Okay. Now let's move our attention to anal cushion. What is anal cushion? As the name implies, it's like a cushion. Anal cushion is a sac of connective tissue that contains thin, dilated vascular channels. Thin, dilated vascular channels. Okay, let me tell you what I mean. So this is the anal canal, and this is the pectinate line, and this is the white line, all right, of Hilton. Now, the anal cushions are normal structures, but they are present above the pectinate line, and they raise the wall of the anal canal in this region. So they are in the columnar part of the anal canal. Inside, they contain thin, dilated, sinusoidal sacs, or that contains a lot of blood. These sinusoid, it's a cross section like that, but I'm going to draw somewhat on a separate diagram. You know, the terminal branches of the superior rectal artery, the very terminal branches, they come in and they directly drain or flow into sinusoidal veins. You get me? There is direct AV communication, direct arteriovenous communication, no capillary bed in between them. And that's of course a very extensive network of such channels, which are, you know, interconnected with each other, and so on. There's a lot of them, and they fill the heart of the cushion. They fill the cushion. Okay. Now, these cushions are heavy. They are very baggy, heavy, because they contain a lot of blood with thin-walled, dilated vessels. So they have tendency to fall. They have tendency to prolapse. But that does not happen naturally, or normally it does not happen. Why it does not happen? Let me tell you. Of course, earlier we said that there is, just under the mucosa and submucosa, is the internal anal sphincter. Right? This is internal anal sphincter, which is what? Which is the continuation of the inner circular muscle coat of rectum. Then outside that we have the intersphincteric plane, and then the external anal sphincter complex, the skeletal muscle. And here is the intersphincteric plane. We said that levator ani comes like this, and the outer longitudinal muscle of the rectum continues down into the intersphincteric plane, joins some fiber from levator ani and form conjoint longitudinal muscle. Now this descends into the intersphincteric plane. Now some fibers from the conjoint longitudinal muscle, they penetrate the internal sphincter and move inside of the anal cushion. it act like cement. It act like supporting structures, something that holds this anal cushion in place. This extension, these fibromuscular extensions from the conjoint longitudinal muscle, is called muscles of Treitz. Muscle of Treitz. Muscle. Don't confuse that with DJ junction. Muscle of Treitz. There is a similar muscle, but it's hanging the DJ junction. It's not our topic of today, but there's muscles of Treitz. Treitz, I think, described this structure in 1850s, maybe 1853. I think it's 1853 or 1852, I'm not sure. But in the 1850s, he described the structure as, he just gave it a description. But now we come to know that this structure is so important in supporting the anal cushions. And if this structure is weak, if Treitz muscle is weak, or is deficient, or degenerates, or whatever, disappears, the anal cushion, as I told you, it's heavy, it fills with blood, and it becomes saggy, and it descends down. It descends down. This anal cushion becomes saggy, and it prolapses downward. It fills with a lot of blood and it prolapses downwards, and we call this what? Hemorrhoids. Hemorrhoids, of course, the vascular channels become so distended. The hemorrhoids are, hemeroid means flowing blood. I think it's in Greek, means flowing blood. Because the bleeding from hemorrhoid is often bright red. But you may be asking, how is that so? These are dilated veins. The blood should be dark and not bright red or arterial red. The reason is this. As I told you, there is no capillary bed. Arterial blood flows directly to these sinusoidal channels or veins. So actually what's bleeding is in fact arterial blood, right? Because it's from the veins, but it's why it's bright red, because of these direct AV connections. Isn't that fascinating? I find this very interesting. Now, we talked about hemorrhoids in detail in the lecture, abdominal surgery. But what I want to remind you is that these cushions, we have three main cushions. If we put a patient in the lithotomy position, this is a patient in the lithotomy position, and we inspect patient's anus, I'm gonna make it out of proportionally bigger, and we view the anus as a clock. Okay, so that will be 12 o'clock, that will be 6 o'clock, right? And that will be 3 o'clock, and that will be 9 o'clock. Remember 3, 7, 11. 3, 7, 11. There is a main cushion that is present at position number 3. And there's another one at position number 7. And another one at position number 11. 3, 7, 11. Right? This is patient's right, this is patient's left. So we call this cushion anterior right cushion. And we call this cushion posterior right cushion. And we call this cushion left cushion, left lateral cushion. So we have three main cushions. Sometimes there are accessory or daughter cushions, but smaller ones that are in between the big ones. All right, you may be wondering why these structures are there. Normally, they are normal structures. Only when they become dilated and descend, they are called hemorrhoids. But they are normal structures above the dentate line. But Function-wise, what do? They are thought to seal the anus. They come together and seal the anus, and thus they have role in continence, in maintaining continence, fecal and flatus continence. So they seal the anus. That's what they do, or thought that they do. And that's what they are. Some people call them corpus cavernosum recti. Corpus, just in case they give you a weird name, corpus cavernosum recti. Why they are called this name? You know, corpus cavernosum of the penis, the erectile tissue of the penis, there are somewhat erectile tissues as well, because they can fill with blood and balloon. That's what they call them, corpus cavernosum recti, because they are not exactly in the rectum, they are above the dentate line in the anal canal, upper anal canal. Okay, all right. So that's about the anal cushions. Now, what I want to, and their clinical correlates.